Unmute.
There we go.
Okay. So, hi, I'm Emma,
I'm Richie.
and this is our capstone. We were tasked to design and code a website for the launch of the ladder, which is based in Redruth, England, in an old library that the co-founders, Josh and Felix, are refurbishing to create a creative space for Redruth and Cornwall. At this library, they are creating a hub for their event and performing arts business, as well as many other businesses, such as a cafe, nursery, events, and many more things. We worked specifically with the directors, Felix and Josh. We met with them almost every other week to go talk about the content and the look of the site. After a few of our meetings, we established a general idea of what we wanted on the site, but this process was a bit of a struggle just because there was so many businesses out there building that we needed to include. So it took a bit of time to decide how those would be laid out and how they wanted it to look. But I was also given, after the initial meeting, access to their brand assets and guidelines, and I was to use these to create their website. At the second meeting, I presented them with some initial sketches of organization, layouts, and content ideas based off of our initial meeting. And I also presented them with 3 design directions. At this meeting, we established that they liked the middle design, which is labeled playful, but they requested it to be more creative focused. And at the next meeting, I presented them with these designs. Here we established the photography treatment being black and white or color treated with orange or teal, and also implementing the icons, whether they're overlaid on top of images or being next to text. And we also arranged the homepage at this meeting. Once we had established the design direction at the next meeting, I was able to present them with more of the pages using this design direction. And at this point, we established this is how it's generally going to look. We just needed to gather information and implement it. But we found that gathering the information was difficult because they're still refurbishing and building the library. So they were focused on doing that for their launch. And so they didn't have a lot of finished photos of the building. And they also were focused on getting the building ready for their launch. So they didn't have a lot of time to gather and create the copy to go on the site. And we also had a slight delay because of the time difference. So the project was delayed a few times, but after a few weeks, we had our final design. Here's just some quick look. You have the home page, the about, which talks about their story, the history page, which talks about the building story, directory with the businesses there, news pages, which they can do blog posts. They have the events, which highlights old and upcoming events, and then also using our space, which highlights things that people can do with or at the building.
All right, so when it comes to implementing the actual website, these are the tools that we used. So for the front end, we used Vue, which is a component-based sort of, I guess, system. You make these files that have a pretty similar syntax to HTML, except you can call other files as HTML elements, basically. I guess that's like one way to think of it. It also lets you do logic-based rendering, so you can have if or for loops to control how much or what you want to render on the actual website itself. For styling, we use Tailwind, which is pretty similar to CSS in terms of it uses CSS classes and your sort of inline styling things. So it kind of fits better for component structure because if everything's being reused, you don't really need a giant CSS file for everything. For the back end, we use TypeScript, which is pretty similar to JavaScript. The main use for us in this case was to fetch things for the CMS and give parameters for our different view components. For the CMS, we use Storyblock, which is a way for anyone who's not a web developer to sort of add content to the website itself. It lets people basically give some sort of parameters like text or image, and it lets the actual website itself present it in a way that is predefined. Also, for communication, we used a service called MailChimp. We primarily use this for newsletters. It's used for a lot of other things. That's what we used it for, and it follows all the guidelines for, privacy and all that. So it's better off to let someone else do that work for us. So yeah. The overall process for implementing a design was that I would look at the designs that Emma made, and I would sort of map out how they would look in different screen sizes. And then I would implement them and see how they looked in practice and make any changes that I saw fit after that. And then I would make sure that the content can actually be edited through Storyblock. So here's an example. You can see in Storyblock we have all these different articles. The second image is a detailed view of one of the blocks on the left there. And on the right is how all of those blocks look together on the actual web page itself. Some challenges, pretty much everything that we used here is something new for me. I've never really done anything outside of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript for web development. I also haven't used Storyblock, let alone, sorry, I haven't used a CSS, let alone Storyblock. So that was also that also came with its own challenges. And time zones. I had a experienced web developer to coordinate with, but he was based in the UK, so I can't really talk to him as much. And if I do, it was pretty limited in the amount of communication we had. So a lot of this was me trying to sort of learn how to learn in a different way. There's a lot of trial and error, and it was definitely a more iterative process than before. Here's what the final site sort of walkthrough looks like. We're just going to show the home page here. So as you can see, it's got the header, and this basically matches the design that was shown earlier. But if you scroll through it, you can see everything. There we go.
Overall, through this project, I learned how to better work with a client's brand guidelines, as well as how to work with a client on a project while they are still collecting content and establishing their business, and how to adapt and still meet deadlines with those constraints.
Yeah, and I had learned basically how to navigate through something that where like nothing's really familiar at all. There were a lot of moments where I had to sort of there are a lot of ways to approach a certain problem, but there were some that tend to work better than others. So I had to sort of navigate to figure out the best way to go about something, which got me in the habit of iterating on all the pages and making sure that I can also adapt to the different changing specifications. All right.
Thank
Thank you.
you.